Hey everyone and welcome back. On this week's video, I'll be talking about why you should never stretch your hamstrings. In fact, if you really think about it, I never really want you to stretch anything. With the possible exception will be lats, but even then, that's not really what we're going at on any given drill. So you may feel a stretch across certain muscles on some of the drills that I coach, but the purpose isn't for you to experience a stretch. The purpose is for you to be able to extract more data from the drill, from your environment, from your body. It's a little bit different than just trying to lengthen something out. And think about that, like a lot of what our body consists of is a 3D structure, right? So you have muscles that attach here and they wrap around the clavicle and they wind up to the back of your neck. You have muscles that have multiple attachment points or they cross over various structures. So it's never really something that you can ascribe to a single line of pull. It's three-dimensional, they wrap around bones, they wrap around other structures, other organs. You have to be able to leverage and anchor the bones in a certain position so that you can influence movement in a way that you see fit. What does that really mean? Well, let's break it down as it pertains to hamstrings. So this here's a pelvis, right? Hamstring group, the medial hamstring group attaches here. So most of us walk around with something that's called an anterior pelvic tilt. So our pelvis is tipped forward. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but for the purposes of this video, we'll just go with it, right? Anterior pelvic tilt. So when you rotate the pelvis this way, forward, this attachment site gets elevated. So now the hamstrings that are attached to that site are being placed on eccentric load. So think of it as a rubber band, right? So you raise the top portion of it, now you're adding an increasing tension to that muscle group. And that's what people generally perceive as tightness in their hamstrings. But the actual issue is that their hamstrings are not tight, their hamstrings are being stretched. Their hamstrings are being influenced by the position of the pelvis. But you see, hamstrings are postural muscles, meaning that they are responsible for allowing us to remain in a more upright position. The primary role of those hamstrings is hip extension. What is hip extension? If your pelvis is here, hip extension is this. So it reorients you and it actually puts you into more of a neutral pelvic orientation. It undoes this anterior pelvic tilt. But what do most of us try to use to create this more of a posterior pelvic tilt? Most of us try to use our rectus, our six-pack muscle, and our glutes. But glutes are really good at external rotation. Glutes are not the best muscle groups for hip extension because when you get both of the glutes to fire, if you get both of these glutes to fire, all you're doing is jamming the sacrum forward. And that influences what's going on at the lumbar spine, it influences the rib cage, it has a whole other slew of after effects. So what you're looking at when you perceive this tension in your hamstrings is the hamstrings are not being used for the purpose that they're originally created. They're created so that we can now stack ourselves appropriately on our heels and we can efficiently resist gravity. Now, if you allow yourself to arch your back, if you allow yourself to really dig into that anterior pelvic tilt, right? What you're going to notice is that most of the pressure in your feet is going to be around your toes. You're also going to notice if you stay there that you're going to have to fire your quads a lot more in order to stay upright and not face plant. All right? Now your back is in an arched position, so your extensors are constantly being loaded to prevent you from falling again. So your hamstrings are going to be perceived as being tight or having less range of motion. You're going to feel like, you're going to try to put your feet up on a bench or something and you're hey, hamstrings are tight, I got to stretch this out. But the issue is that they're now being influenced by how you organize yourself against gravity. They are not the workers in that scenario. When you retrain them to understand how to do their job, meaning how to appropriately hip extend, how to retract or reposition the pelvis and the rib cage. Because if you're sitting out here and then suddenly you're taught how to hip extend, you're actually reorienting the pelvis so that you shift your weight more onto your heels. Now, back extensors no longer have to do so much work. Quads don't have to do so much work. You're sensing increased pressure on the heels. So now you're getting different feedback from your body, different feedback than what you're used to. And we didn't stretch anything. All we did was had you leverage the structures for what they were originally designed to do. So when people experience tightness, for the most part, what they're experiencing is a muscle group or a structure that's being placed on constant eccentric load, and that structure is not allowed to do its job. So it's holding on for dear life, and it's kind of like just holding on to its attachment sites, like, I got nothing left. And it's asking you to reposition some of those attachment sites to be in closer proximity to one another, so that then you can retrain that muscle group to do its job. Right? And that's what happens when a lot of my clients end up cramping midway through the setup on a drill. So when they're doing a 90-90 hip lift, they'll get cramps in their hamstrings. And if they don't get cramps in their hamstrings, but they're close, they really will get cramps on their hamstrings when they start shifting into the right or left side. Right? Because now they're tasking this muscle group to do its originally intended job, but it hasn't done it in quite so long, so now it's kind of like freaking and spazzing out. And for me, that's a really good sign, because it means that now they've finally encountered a task and a set of constraints that allows them to do that. Because again, this isn't the same thing as simply learning how to contract certain muscles. You can contract a muscle that's on eccentric load, but good things are not going to come from that. All right? So these are just some of the reasons why I tell people that they should never stretch their hamstrings. It's because I'm not just looking at the localized sensation of what people perceive when they say, oh, my hamstrings are tight, so and so, and this is the issue. It's not the issue. The issue is that you never learn the skill to position yourself to deal with gravity appropriately. Right? It's like, oh, it's this. Well, I'm here to tell you it's not that. That's not the issue. The issue is actually this. So people come to me thinking that they have a problem, but the problem they're coming to see me for isn't the underlying issue. The underlying issue is something much more intricate. And if you continue to try to address the local issue, the local feedback, you're never going to get to the root of the issue, and it's just going to keep coming back worse and worse as time goes by. All right? So if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them down in the comment section below. Hit me up on Instagram at Mejor Strength, and I'll see all of you next week.